That bike costs more than your yearly rent, Officer Bradley Knox said, standing beside the flashing patrol lights as the matte black Superbike cooled under the Brookhaven sun. Naomi Hayes kept both hands visible on the handlebars for one steady breath before she turned off the engine. The machine gave a low final tick, metal settling from speed into silence. Behind her, traffic slowed on Martin Avenue, less than a mile from police headquarters, where a small room was already being prepared for her swearing in. A white sedan eased past. A delivery truck changed lanes. Someone on the sidewalk lifted a phone, curious enough to record but too far away to understand what had begun. Naomi removed her gloves first, finger by finger, then reached for the release under her helmet. She moved slowly, not because she was afraid, but because she knew how quickly calm black hands could be misread by men who had already decided what story they wanted to tell. The helmet came off, revealing close-cropped curls, smooth brown skin, and eyes that did not ask for permission to be steady. "Good morning, officer," she said. "What is the reason for the stop?" Knox gave a short laugh, not amused, only dismissive. He was 41, broad in the shoulders, sunburned along the neck, with 15 years of patrol sitting in his stance like a badge no one could question. His partner, Officer Tyler Reed, stood several feet behind him near the second cruiser, younger, quieter, one hand resting near his radio, watching Naomi with the uncertain expression of someone who felt the scene did not quite match the call. "Reason?" Knox repeated. "You were riding aggressive." Naomi looked at the wide road, the posted speed limit sign, the traffic camera at the intersection, then back at him. "I was traveling 34 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone." Reed glanced toward the cruiser dash unit almost without meaning to. Knox noticed, and his jaw tightened. "You got proof of ownership for this thing?" he asked, nodding toward the Superbike as if it were stolen property simply because she was sitting on it. Naomi placed her helmet on the tank with care. The black visor reflected the red and blue lights and broken strips. "I have registration, insurance, and my license," she said. "Before I reach for anything, is your body camera recording?" The question changed the temperature around them. Knox stared at her, suddenly less entertained. "You a lawyer?" "No, then do not tell me how to do my job." Naomi did not blink. Heat lifted off the asphalt in soft waves, carrying the smell of rubber, gasoline, and summer dust. Far ahead, the flag above Brookhaven Police Headquarters snapped once in the wind, small and bright against the sky. Naomi could see it from where she stood. She could have ended this in 10 seconds. One sentence. One title. One truth dropped cleanly between them. But she stayed quiet. She wanted to know who they were when they thought she was only a black woman on an expensive bike with no power at all. Knox stepped closer, his boots stopping just inside the painted shoulder line. "License," he said. Slowly. Naomi reached into the inner pocket of her leather jacket, every motion deliberate, every breath measured. Reed watched her hands now, not with suspicion, but with a growing discomfort he did not yet know how to name. Naomi handed over the documents. Knox took them, barely looking at her name before his eyes returned to the bike. "Naomi Hayes," he read. "Where were you headed in such a hurry, Miss Hayes?" She looked past him toward the low brick building at the end of Martin Avenue, where her new office waited with an empty desk, a folded uniform, and a captain's badge not yet pinned to her chest. Then she looked back at Knox. "To work," she said. Naomi Hayes had learned early that people often noticed the machine before they noticed the woman riding it. The Superbike was a matte black Kawasaki Ninja H2, powerful, precise, and unforgiving to anyone careless enough to treat it like a toy. To Naomi, it was not a toy. It was a promise she had made to herself after years of waking before sunrise, running until her lungs burned, studying case law at kitchen tables, and carrying grief in places no uniform could cover. She had bought it with her own money the week Brookhaven confirmed her appointment, not to impress anyone, but to mark the fact that she had survived every room that tried to make her smaller. South Brookhaven had raised her on cracked sidewalks, summer heat, church fish fries, and neighbors who knew how to stretch groceries until Friday. Her mother worked nights at a county hospital. Her father drove city buses until arthritis took the strength from his hands. Naomi grew up understanding that respect was rarely handed to people like her, so she built herself out of discipline instead. At 18, she joined the Marines because she wanted structure stronger than fear. She learned how to stand still under pressure, how to read a room before entering it, how to hear disrespect without letting it steer her. Years later, when she came home and joined law enforcement, some people called her too serious, too direct, too unwilling to smile through foolishness. Naomi let them talk. She worked domestic violence cases, cold burglaries, missing person searches, corruption tips, and 2 internal investigations no one else wanted to touch. Her reports were clean. Her witnesses trusted her. Her arrests held up because she respected procedure more than shortcuts. Deputy Chief Evelyn Grant had noticed that first. "You do not chase authority," Grant had told her during the final interview. "You carry it." Naomi had not answered right away because the sentence felt too close to prayer. Now, on the side of Martin Avenue with 2 cruisers behind her and headquarters less than a mile ahead, she stood in a leather jacket instead of a captain's uniform, boots planted on hot asphalt, listening to a man decide what kind of person she was by the price of her bike and the color of her skin. Her younger sister Jasmine had warned her that morning over coffee. "You sure you want to ride in on that thing your first day?" Naomi had smiled while fastening her watch. "It is my first day as captain, not my first day being judged." Jasmine had not laughed. She only looked at her with the tired, worried black women pass between each other without needing a speech. "Just get there safe," she said. Naomi promised she would. She had taken the long way through South Brookhaven before turning toward headquarters, passing the old recreation center where she used to shoot free throws after school, the laundromat where her mother folded uniforms, the diner where her father drank black coffee at 5 in the morning. Every mile had reminded her why the appointment mattered. Not because of the title. Because someone who knew those streets was finally going to lead the people sworn to protect them. Then the lights appeared behind her. No siren at first, just red and blue in her mirrors, sharp against the morning sun. She pulled over cleanly, signaling, stopping on a wide shoulder near a row of crepe myrtles. She had done everything right. That had not stopped Knox from seeing guilt before evidence. It had not stopped Reed from following his senior officer's lead. Naomi watched Knox now as he held her license and registration, pretending to inspect documents, while really measuring whether she would shrink. She did not. The Superbike ticked softly beside her, cooling in the heat like a heartbeat slowing after a hard run. And Naomi, who had spent her life earning rooms that never expected her, waited to see how much truth these officers could ignore before the badge on her desk became necessary. Bradley Knox had been wearing the Brookhaven badge for 15 years, long enough to mistake habit for wisdom. Around the precinct, younger officers knew his stories before they knew his rules. He talked about the old days, about streets getting worse, about instincts that could not be taught in academy classrooms. He said instinct like it was sacred. He said suspicion like it was science. He said people showed you who they were if you looked hard enough, but what Knox called looking was often just choosing a story before the facts had a chance to speak. He liked clean lines. Quiet compliance. Drivers who apologized before they knew why they had been stopped. Men who lowered their eyes. Women who softened their voices. Anyone who did not do those things became, in his mind, difficult. Naomi Hayes had become difficult the moment she asked for the reason for the stop without fear in her voice. Knox stood near the front of his cruiser with her documents in his hand, scanning them slowly though nothing about them was unclear. The registration matched the bike. The insurance was current. The license was valid. The name was plain in black letters, Naomi Denise Hayes. Still, he looked at the Superbike again as if paperwork could not explain ownership when his assumptions had already objected. Officer Tyler Reed watched from a few feet away, sweating lightly beneath his vest. Reed had been on patrol less than 2 years and still believed experience meant learning from men like Knox. That belief had begun to loosen. Something about Naomi's calm unsettled him, not because it seemed dangerous, but because it seemed familiar in a way he could not place. She spoke like someone who knew policy. She stood like someone trained not to waste movement. She kept her hands visible without being asked twice, but there was no submission in it. Just discipline. Knox turned back to her. So you just bought this bike outright? He asked. Naomi's expression did not change. Yes. Must be nice. It was earned. Reed looked at Knox, then at the documents. Registration is clean, he said quietly. Knox gave him a hard glance. I did not ask for your conclusion. Reed's face tightened, and he looked down. Naomi noticed. She always noticed the second person in the room, the one still deciding who they were going to become. Knox stepped closer, holding her license between two fingers. You know, expensive bikes like this get stolen and moved fast. Sometimes people have paperwork that looks good until we dig. Then dig properly, Naomi said. Document the stop, state the articulable reason, and make sure both body cameras are active. The word articulable landed like a stone dropped in shallow water. Reed's eyes flicked toward her. Knox's jaw flexed. You always talk like that during traffic stops. Only when the stop sounds like a search looking for a reason. A car slowed in the next lane. The person on the sidewalk raised the phone higher. The morning heat thickened around them, pressing against the asphalt, the patrol cars, the black bike, the three bodies caught in a silence that no longer felt routine. Knox smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. You think you are smarter than us? Naomi looked at the badge on his chest, then at his face. I think your badge deserves better than your assumptions. Reed inhaled sharply before he could hide it. Knox heard it. His pride did too. For men like Knox, embarrassment did not create reflection. It created escalation. He took one step back, turned toward the cruiser, and said, Run it again. Bike, license, everything. Reed hesitated. Sir, everything already matches. Knox did not turn around. I said run it again. Naomi watched Reed walk to the cruiser with her documents, discomfort written across his shoulders. She could still see headquarters beyond the intersection, close enough that if the light changed, she could be there in 3 minutes. Inside that building, officers were probably checking their watches, wondering why the new captain had not arrived. She let the silence stretch. Knox wanted her impatient. Angry. Afraid. Anything that would help him turn his feeling into a report. Naomi gave him none of it. She stood beside the Superbike, helmet resting on the tank, sunlight sliding over the black fairing like water over stone, and waited while Bradley Knox tried to prove that his instinct was not just prejudice wearing a uniform. Reed sat inside the cruiser with the door open, typing the same information into the system for the second time while the radio murmured beside him. The screen gave him nothing to support Knox's suspicion. Valid license. Current registration. No stolen vehicle alert. No warrants. No flags. Just a woman on her way somewhere, delayed on the side of the road because a senior officer did not like the picture she made in his head. Reed looked through the windshield at Naomi, still standing beside the Superbike, calm under the sun, leather jacket zipped halfway, helmet gleaming on the fuel tank. She had not paced. She had not argued with passing drivers. She had not touched her phone. She simply waited, and somehow that waiting had more authority than Knox's impatience. Reed stepped out with the documents. Everything is clear, he said. Knox took the papers without looking at him. Clear does not mean done. Naomi turned her head slightly. Then what remains? Knox's mouth tightened. A few questions. Related to what violation? She asked. Related to my investigation. An investigation needs a basis. The sentence was soft, but it cut clean. A man in a pickup slowed near the shoulder, watching. The person on the sidewalk continued recording. Traffic moved around them in careful streams, the city pretending not to stare while staring anyway. Knox glanced at the phone, then back at Naomi. You got a smart mouth for someone standing on a roadside. I have a lawful question for someone conducting a stop. Reed's eyes dropped for half a second. He knew she was right. That was the hardest part. Knox looked at the Superbike again, then at Naomi's boots, jacket, and helmet as if expensive gear required permission from him. Tell me where you bought it. Brookhaven Motorsports. 3 weeks ago. Salesman name? Derek Shaw. Paid how? Naomi exhaled slowly through her nose. Officer Knox, my method of payment is not evidence of a traffic violation. Knox leaned closer, not enough to touch, but enough to make the air around them smaller. People like you always have an answer ready. Reed looked up sharply. Naomi did not move. For the first time, something passed behind her eyes that was not patience, but it did not become anger. It became focus. People like me? She repeated. Knox realized the phrase had escaped too cleanly to pull back, so he dressed it in procedure. People on high-end stolen bikes. You already confirmed it is not stolen. I confirmed the paperwork looks fine. Naomi nodded once, as if he had finally said the quiet part in a language the report could understand. Then document that you continued questioning me after the registration cleared because you believed the paperwork only looked fine. Knox's face hardened. Do not tell me what to write. Then write the truth without being told. The patrol lights flashed behind her, red and blue against the black fairing, against the white lane stripe, against Reed's uneasy face. A woman passing by on foot stopped near the corner, phone raised but hands trembling. Naomi saw her. Another black woman, maybe in her 50s, work badge clipped to her blouse, watching with the tight expression of someone who had seen too many stops begin with nothing and turn into paperwork that never told the whole story. Naomi held her gaze for just a second. Not a plea. A promise. She would not give Knox the mistake he wanted. Knox turned toward Reed. Search the bike identification number manually. Reed hesitated. Sir, the vehicle identification number matches the registration. Manually. Reed looked at Naomi, then at the bike, then at Knox. His voice came out quieter than before. What is the probable cause? The question froze the shoulder of Martin Avenue. Knox stared at him as if betrayal had just put on a rookie uniform. Naomi remained still, but something in the silence shifted. Reed had not become brave all at once. He had only asked the question the badge required. And sometimes that was where courage began. Knox's eyes stayed on Reed for a long second, and in that second the senior officer's confidence stopped looking like experience, and started looking like pride under pressure. The traffic light ahead changed from red to green. Cars rolled forward, tires whispering over hot pavement, but no one inside the stop seemed to move. Naomi stood beside the Superbike with her documents still in Knox's hand, the black helmet reflecting the 2 patrol cars behind her. She could feel the heat pressing through her jacket and into her shoulders. She could feel the eyes from the sidewalk, from the pickup, from the woman with the work badge who still had not walked away. Public attention did not comfort her. Cameras could record a moment, but they could not always save the person living inside it. Probable cause, Knox repeated, his voice flat. Reed swallowed but did not step back. Yes, sir. If the registration is valid and the vehicle identification number matches, I am asking what legal basis we have to continue. Naomi looked at Reed then, not with gratitude exactly, because doing the minimum correctly should not require applause, but with recognition. The young officer was standing at the edge of a choice. Knox gave a short, humorless laugh. You have been on the job 5 minutes and now you are teaching me law? Reed's face reddened. No, sir. I am asking for clarification. Clarification is that people do not ride machines like this through this part of town unless something is off. The sentence landed hard enough to make the woman on the sidewalk lower her phone slightly, as if even the device had heard too much. Naomi's expression did not change. This part of town is where I grew up. Knox turned back to her. Convenient. True, she said. Not convenient. He stepped toward the bike and looked down at the side panel. Open the storage compartment. Naomi's voice remained steady. No. Reed's shoulders tightened. Knox looked up slowly. Excuse me? No, Naomi repeated. You have my license, registration, insurance, and a cleared vehicle check. You have not stated a lawful reason to search anything. Knox stared at her as if calm refusal were louder than shouting. You really want to make this difficult? I want you to make it lawful. The air seemed to thicken. A bus passed in the far lane, its brakes sighing at the intersection, and for a moment Naomi smelled diesel, hot asphalt, and the faint leather inside her helmet. She thought of Jasmine's voice that morning. Just get there safe. She thought of Deputy Chief Grant waiting at headquarters with a room full of officers who had never worked under a black woman captain before. She thought of her father's old bus route cutting through South Brookhaven, past the same storefronts Knox now treated like evidence of suspicion. Knox lifted his chin. People like you always come prepared with lines. Naomi's eyes settled on him. And officers like you always call preparation a threat. Reed looked down at the body camera on his chest, then back up. The red light was on. Recording. Knox noticed where Reed looked and seemed to remember, too late, that the stop had witnesses beyond the sidewalk. His mouth tightened, but his pride would not let him retreat cleanly. Miss Hayes, he said, dragging the title out, you are going to stand right there until I am satisfied. Naomi glanced toward headquarters, close enough now that the flag above it snapped in the sun like a signal she had not yet answered. Then she looked back at him. Officer Knox, your satisfaction is not the standard. For the first time, he had no immediate reply. Only the patrol lights kept moving, washing red and blue over the black bike, over Reed's uncertain face, over Naomi's steady hands. The stop had become what Knox never intended it to be, a test, not of her innocence, but of his judgment. The heat on Martin Avenue became its own kind of silence. It rose from the asphalt in slow waves, bending the air around the Superbike, softening the edges of the patrol cars, making the headquarters building in the distance shimmer like something almost reachable. Naomi stood in that heat without shifting her feet. The black leather of her gloves rested beside the helmet on the fuel tank. Her jacket felt heavier now, not from fear, but from the weight of being measured by a man who could not see past the picture he had built. The bike ticked as it cooled, each small metallic sound precise and patient. Tick. 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 It reminded her of the clock above the hallway outside Internal Affairs, where she had once waited to testify against an officer everyone else called a good man. It reminded her of the metronome her father used when teaching her rhythm on an old keyboard after long bus shifts. It reminded her that discipline was often just patience with a spine. Knox still held her documents, but the power of that gesture had begun to fade. Papers could only be withheld for so long before the reason became the story. Reed stood near the cruiser, one hand close to his radio, eyes moving between Knox and Naomi with the expression of someone hearing his own training fight against his fear of disappointing a senior officer. The woman on the sidewalk had stopped recording openly now, but her phone remained angled in her hand. A bicyclist slowed near the corner. A man in a work van watched through his open window. The stop had gathered witnesses without becoming loud. Naomi looked at headquarters again. Less than a mile. A 5-minute ride if the lights favored her. Inside, Deputy Chief Evelyn Grant was probably checking her watch. A row of folded chairs would be waiting in the community room. A small flag would stand near the podium. Someone had likely placed her captain's badge in a presentation box, polished and bright, a symbol everyone liked to honor after the hard part had already been survived. Naomi thought of what her father had told her when she graduated from the academy years earlier. The uniform does not make you honorable. What you do when no one knows your rank does. That sentence had stayed with her longer than any ceremony. It returned now, clear as a hand on her shoulder. She could end this. She could say the words and watch Knox rearrange his face. She could let the title do what her personhood had not been allowed to do. But she waited one more breath because this moment mattered before the badge entered it. This was the truth of the street. This was how some officers spoke when they thought a citizen had no shield but patience. Knox finally glanced toward the cruiser camera, then toward Reed's body camera, then at the phones nearby. He understood the audience now. Not justice yet. Optics. There was a difference. "Miss Hayes," he said, forcing his voice into something official, "I am going to give you an opportunity to cooperate." Naomi turned back from the distant station. "I have cooperated with every lawful request. You refused to open the compartment. Because you have not provided lawful cause." Reed lowered his eyes briefly, and Naomi saw the truth settle heavier on him. Knox exhaled through his nose, anger trimmed into procedure. "You know, most people who have nothing to hide do not make this many objections." Naomi's gaze stayed level. "Most people who know the law object when it is being bent." The words did not rise. They did not need to. A gust of warm wind moved along the shoulder, lifting dust against the curb and fluttering the edge of Reed's citation pad. The flag at headquarters snapped again in the distance. Naomi's phone buzzed once inside her jacket, likely Jasmine, likely wondering why the swearing-in live stream had not started. Naomi did not reach for it. She kept her hands visible, her breathing slow, her face calm enough that Knox could not use it against her. Beneath the sunlight and the flashing patrol lights, the moment hung perfectly still, balanced between who Knox believed she was and who she had always been. The radio broke the silence before Knox could. A sharp burst of static came from Reed's shoulder, followed by a dispatcher's voice cutting through the heat with ordinary urgency. "Unit 12, confirm your location. Deputy Chief Grant is asking for an estimated arrival on Captain Hayes. Swearing-in ceremony is delayed." Reed froze. The words seemed to hang above the shoulder of Martin Avenue, brighter than the patrol lights, heavier than the sun. Naomi did not move. Knox turned his head slowly toward Reed, irritation still on his face, but now something else had begun to form beneath it. Confusion. Reed reached for his radio with a hand that suddenly looked less steady. "Dispatch, repeat that last transmission." The answer came clear. "Deputy Chief Grant is requesting status on Captain Naomi Hayes. She was expected at headquarters 10 minutes ago." Reed looked down at the license still in Knox's hand. Naomi Denise Hayes. The name sat there in black letters, no longer just paperwork, no longer just a person Knox had decided to question until she became nervous enough to fit his suspicion. Reed's face changed first. His eyes lifted from the license to Naomi, then to the headquarters building in the distance, then back to Naomi again. He swallowed. "Sir?" he said quietly to Knox. "Her name is Hayes." Knox did not answer. The red and blue lights kept moving across his uniform, across the side of the Superbike, across Naomi's calm face. The woman on the sidewalk raised her phone again, not excited now, but stunned. Traffic kept passing, unaware that an entire chain of command had just shifted on a roadside. Reed straightened without thinking. His training recognized what his courage had not yet reached. "Captain Hayes?" he said, his voice low. "Ma'am." Knox's expression tightened as if the title itself had struck him in a place pride could not armor. Naomi reached out, slowly, and took her license and registration from his hand. This time he let them go. She placed the documents back into her jacket, then lifted her sunglasses from the collar of her shirt and set them on top of her head. Only then did she look directly at Knox. "I am Captain Naomi Hayes," she said. "Your new police captain." Nothing on the street made a sound for a moment except the cooling engine and the distant snap of the flag above headquarters. Knox stared at her, all his earlier certainty draining into the hot pavement. The expensive bike, the leather jacket, the calm questions, the refusal to open the compartment, the request for body cameras, every detail he had treated as attitude rearranged itself into discipline. Reed stood fully upright now, shoulders squared, face pale with embarrassment. "Captain, I apologize," he said. Naomi did not accept it yet. She turned her gaze from Reed to Knox, then to the patrol cars, then to the phones, then back to the badge on Knox's chest. "You stopped a citizen without articulating a valid reason. You continued after the documents cleared. You requested access to property without probable cause. And when challenged, you leaned on suspicion instead of law. Knox's mouth opened, but no defense arrived clean enough to survive the body camera. Naomi's voice stayed quiet. You were not testing me, Officer Knox. You were showing me the department I just inherited. Reed lowered his eyes. Knox did not. Not at first. But the force had left him. His badge still shone in the sun, but it no longer made him look large. Naomi picked up her helmet from the tank, holding it against her side. Both of you will return to headquarters immediately after clearing this stop. Preserve all footage. Do not discuss this with anyone before Deputy Chief Grant and Internal Affairs are present. Reed nodded at once. Yes, Captain. Knox hesitated half a second too long. Naomi looked at him with the full weight of the title he had failed to see coming. That was not a suggestion. Knox's jaw moved once. Yes, Captain. Naomi put on her gloves slowly, mounted the Superbike, and started the engine. The sound rolled low across Martin Avenue, controlled and steady. Before she pulled away, she looked once toward the woman on the sidewalk, who lowered her phone and gave a small nod. Naomi returned it. Then she eased back into traffic, not speeding, not proving anything, riding toward headquarters while the two officers remained on the shoulder behind her, standing in the shadow of a truth they had created themselves. Naomi arrived at headquarters 6 minutes after the radio call, not late enough to explain the whole story, but late enough for every face in the community room to turn when the glass doors opened. The room had been arranged with careful ceremony, folded chairs in clean rows, a small American flag near the podium, a city seal on the wall, and a polished badge resting inside a presentation box under the fluorescent lights. Deputy Chief Evelyn Grant stood at the front with her hands folded, silver hair tucked neatly behind one ear, her expression unreadable, until she saw Naomi step inside holding her black helmet at her side. For a second, Grant's eyes moved over the leather jacket, the dust on Naomi's boots, the controlled set of her mouth, and understood that the delay had not been traffic. Captain Hayes, Grant said, her voice carrying through the room. Every officer present straightened. Some did it with respect. Some did it with surprise. A few did it because everyone else had. Naomi walked down the center aisle without rushing, the helmet tucked under one arm, the sunlight from the front windows following her across the floor in bright rectangles. She could feel the weight of the morning still on her shoulders, not heavier than the badge waiting for her, but connected to it. The ceremony continued because institutions loved ceremony. Grant spoke about service, integrity, public trust, and leadership earned through record instead of politics. Naomi listened, standing still, hands relaxed at her sides. When the badge was pinned to her uniform shirt in the adjoining office a few minutes later, the metal felt cool through the fabric, almost too small to hold everything people expected it to mean. Cameras clicked. Applause filled the room. Naomi shook hands. She thanked the mayor, the city manager, the command staff. She did what the moment required. But when Knox and Reed entered through the rear door nearly 20 minutes later, the air changed. Reed looked as though he had aged since the roadside, his jaw tight, his eyes lowered but not hidden. Knox came in behind him, face controlled, uniform neat, pride still trying to sit straight in his shoulders. Naomi did not address them during the ceremony. She let them stand there with everyone else while the room celebrated the woman they had questioned as if her existence needed verification. That silence did more than a reprimand would have. Afterward, in a conference room with blinds half closed against the afternoon glare, Naomi placed her helmet on the table between herself, Deputy Chief Grant, Internal Affairs Sergeant Morales, Reed, and Knox. The helmet's black visor reflected all of them in a curved, dark line. "This is not about embarrassment," Naomi said. "It is about pattern, policy, and public trust." Grant nodded once to Sergeant Morales, who opened a folder. "Body camera and dash camera footage will be preserved," Morales said. "A stop report will be completed before end of shift. Prior stops involving Officer Knox marked as suspicious vehicle or suspicious person will be reviewed for probable cause language and outcome." Knox shifted. "Captain, I made a judgment call." Naomi looked at him. No. You made an assumption and kept searching for a reason to make it official. The sentence held steady in the room. Reed looked up then. Captain, I should have challenged it sooner. His voice was quiet, but clean. Naomi turned to him. Yes, you should have. He accepted it without flinching. That mattered. You asked the right question eventually, she said. Now learn to ask it before someone has to stand on the roadside proving they are human. Reed nodded. Yes, Captain. Knox said nothing. Grant closed her folder. Officer Knox will be placed on administrative duty pending preliminary review. Knox's face tightened. Deputy Chief, with respect, that is excessive. Naomi leaned forward slightly, not angry, not loud, only certain. A badge should make you more careful, not more comfortable. If that feels excessive, then we have found the problem. No one spoke for several seconds. Outside the conference room, radios crackled, phones rang, footsteps crossed polished tile, the ordinary pulse of a department continuing around a moment that would decide what kind of department it intended to become. Naomi picked up her helmet and stood. The badge on her chest caught the overhead light. We start with the truth, she said. Then we rebuild from there. The next morning, Brookhaven Police Headquarters looked different to Naomi, though nothing physical had changed. The same brick walls held the same rows of windows. The same cruisers sat in the same marked spaces. The same flag moved above the entrance, snapping softly in the warm morning wind. But when Naomi rode into the lot on the matte black Superbike, no patrol car followed her. No one stepped out to question the registration. No one looked at the bike as if it were evidence of something wrong. Officers crossing the parking lot slowed, not with suspicion this time, but with the careful awareness of people learning the shape of a new standard. Naomi parked in the captain's space, shut off the engine, and let the silence settle. The bike ticked as it cooled, the same patient metallic sound from the roadside, but now it did not feel like waiting. It felt like arrival. She removed her helmet and held it under one arm as she walked through the front doors in full uniform, captain's bars at her collar, badge bright against her chest, boots clean against the polished tile. Conversation softened as she passed. A dispatcher looked up from her console and gave a small nod. Two detectives near the coffee station straightened. Reed stood by the report counter with a folder in his hands. His face still carried embarrassment, but not avoidance. That mattered to Naomi. Shame that hid became rot. Shame that stayed visible could become change. He stepped forward. Captain, he said. The stop report and supplemental statement are ready for your review. Naomi took the folder. Thank you, Officer Reed. He hesitated. I added what I should have said sooner. She looked at him for a moment. Good. Now make sure that is not the last time. Reed nodded. Yes, Captain. Across the bullpen, Knox's desk sat empty, his nameplate still there but his chair pushed in, too neat, too quiet. Administrative duty had moved him out of patrol while the review began. There were no speeches about it. No public shaming. No dramatic removal. Just a gap where old certainty used to sit. Naomi continued to her office. It was small but bright, with a window overlooking the parking lot and South Brookhaven beyond it. On the desk rested the unopened files Grant had left the night before, complaint summaries, staffing charts, use of force reviews, community meeting notes, internal policy drafts. Naomi placed her helmet beside them, black visor facing the room like a silent witness. For a moment, she looked at the reflection in it, a black woman in uniform, steady-eyed, standing in an office that had not expected her soon enough but now had to answer to her. She thought of Jasmine's warning, her father's old lesson, the woman on the sidewalk with the phone, Reed's late but necessary question, Knox's face when the radio said her name. None of it felt like victory. Victory sounded too simple. This felt like responsibility. She opened the first file and began reading. Outside her window, sunlight touched the Superbike in the captain's space, turning the black metal warm at the edges. A few officers passed it on the way to their cruisers. One glanced at it, then toward Naomi's office, and kept walking. No jokes. No whispers. No doubt loud enough to survive the morning. The radio on her desk crackled with routine calls, small emergencies, names, addresses, the endless pulse of a city asking to be protected fairly. Naomi picked up a pen. The badge on her chest did not make her honorable. It only gave her more chances to prove what she had already known on the roadside. Power means nothing unless it protects the people who have none.